Do your characters feel more like cardboard cutouts than real people? Today we're gonna fix that. Hello, welcome back to my channel. I am Bridget, I am a writer and filmmaker, and I'm here to help you write the best, most authentic, and engaging stories that you possibly can. And today we are talking about character. Specifically, we are talking about building authentic character emotion and making your character's emotions feel believable. We are going to be talking about a lot of media in this video, so I'm going to give a little spoiler alert. I'm going to be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender twice, Heartstopper, Shadow and Bone / Six of Crows, Stranger Things Season 4, and the movie Knives Out. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Part 1, match emotions to experiences. Just like people, your characters' emotions come from their past experiences. We all have experiences that have shaped how we react to things we encounter. We get triggered by things. We just react in ways that are informed by past events. Like, we are not blank slates, and your characters shouldn't be either. Now, I'm not saying that you need to know every single event that happened in your character's past. What I am saying is that it is very helpful to find a key defining moment or event in general that shaped something of your character's worldview and how they interact with key characters throughout your story. One of the examples I'm going to use for this particular section is Katara from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Her big moment is pretty obvious. We learn about it pretty early on, as it is when her mother was killed by the Fire Nation, and this is something that drives her throughout the rest of the story. It's impacted every part of her life. It impacts her relationship with her brother. It impacts her relationship with everybody because it made her into much more of a maternal figure in her family and take on that kind of responsibility. So the event of Sokka and Katara's mother being killed changes how Katara acts around everyone in her life and how she interacts with people in general. The world is different to her now, and she is very maternal because of that. She is very protective of people, and she has a very strong sense of justice because of all these things that have happened to her. This event for Katara not only gives her more backstory, but also it gives her more of a personal connection to, as I'll talk about later, the stakes of the story. Because the Fire Nation is the big bad of the show, Katara having this personal connection is very important. Her having to deal with the emotions of this through the series as she meets new people does make her feel more real as we see the complexity of her emotions. One of the big things about making a character's emotions feel real is not leaning into one specific emotion. You don't want to fully lean into despair, you don't want to fully lean into happiness, and so on and so forth. Our lives are not fully depressing most of the time, and also our lives aren't fully sunshine and rainbows all the time. There's always going to be a balance of both. People are complex, and we don't like to sit in one emotion for very long, which, well, we probably do like to sit in happiness for a bit longer, but often we are pulled out of it by something, probably our subconscious. We're pulled out of it by different events, by other people, all kinds of things. Another example I want to use in this part is Charlie Spring from Heartstopper. The show itself balances the emotions of happiness, like queer joy and all that fun stuff, and the very serious topics of Charlie's bullying and kind of accidental coming out and self-harm and overall really serious topics. But it handles them in such a way that it doesn't lean too much on one emotion. It hits hard and then shows that there's still good in their lives. This helps the characters feel more dimensional because it shows that they have ups and downs. It isn't all down all the time, because we want that roller coaster. We want to be able to see the characters have a good day and then have a bad day, because we all have those. We want to relate to them because they have good days and bad days. It's not fun or engaging to have someone be happy all the time. It's not believable. So having them have a turbulent life is actually really relatable. Now that's the end of this first part, and at the end of each part, I'm going to give you a prompting question. And the prompting question for this section is, what experiences in your character's past informs how they respond in the present? What emotional scars do they carry with them? Part 2, hide it away. People in real life don't like to talk about the hard things. It takes so long for us to unpack trauma. It takes a lot of work to work through limiting beliefs and everything in between. And often we do like to give our characters some trauma because it's engaging. But the other thing is not unpacking it too quickly, because people don't like to deal with hard emotions. We like to avoid them. The example I'm going to use for this section is Kaz Brekker from the Six of Crows books / the Shadow and Bone series. And Kaz is quite the tortured character. He has been through a lot and has quite the rough exterior. He is very closed off emotionally, and it takes a lot for him to open up just a little bit to one of his closest friends and potential love interest. But it does eventually start to happen in the show. I think we get a little bit further, if I remember correctly, in the books, but in the show we do get a scene where Kaz opens up that one of the big villains, Pecker Rollins, had killed his brother. And this comes about because his friend and love interest, or, you know, it's a will they won't they kind of situation if you haven't watched the show or read the books. Inej is about to leave their mission. She's asking for a reason to stay. She's asking for any viable reason that they are risking their lives to do this job. And he offers up information about his backstory in order to get her to stay. The trigger of this is that I don't believe this would have happened with any other character. It is very specific to the relationship between Kaz and Inej. There would have been a lot more work that would need to go into the relationship or the tension of needing this person to be on the job for Kaz to offer up such personal information about his backstory. If it was Jesper, for instance, I don't see it going the same way. They do have a close relationship, but it's not in the same sense. Moving back to the actual point, we are given hints about Kaz's backstory in the show and I believe in the book. I don't remember the book as well as the show. I'm much more of a visual person. But we are given breadcrumbs of Kaz's past in the show, but this is the first time that we really have him say it out loud. And it really changes things because it shows that he's opening up. However, the buildup of all of this is really important because the importance of this happening is built from it being hidden away. So I want you to remember that your character's trauma is going to be hidden. You need it to be hidden because they won't want to talk about it. It's so traumatic that revisiting it won't be their first instinct. It won't even be like their 100th instinct. They'll be like, I will do anything I can to not talk about this. This also happens in Heartstopper. When we have the last one of the last scenes of season 2, when Charlie opens up to Nick, he knows that Nick is a safe place, but it's still so incredibly hard to say the words. And that is such a human experience, because we just don't want to think about the hard things that we've gone through. It's something that we want to forget about. So if your character has a traumatic backstory for a while, you just need to lay the seeds. It's not something that a lot of them will want to talk about. Sure, there's characters like Katara that do like to talk about their trauma to anybody that will listen, but a lot of characters who are a lot more emotionally closed off, they don't want to talk about it. So you can do ones like Katara, but it's important to remember that that will change the dynamics that your character has with other characters. So it depends on what kind of character you are dealing with. Now, the prompting question for this section is there someone your character feels safe enough around to open up to? If not, how can you build that kind of relationship into your story? Part 3, keep it complex. People have complicated emotions and complicated relationships with each other. So, diving into the nuances of human emotions can be quite tricky. But it is very important, because we don't usually have like one emotion associated with an interaction. There can be so many different emotions swirling around in our brains. It's quite confusing. For this section, I'm going to be using the example of Stranger Things Season 4, specifically Max. Now in Season 4, we have the storyline of Max going through the grieving stages around the death of her brother, Billy. This is a very good example of complex character emotions, because Max doesn't go through just one emotion around Billy's death, because they had a complicated relationship. They did not have a normal sibling relationship. It was very, very dysfunctional. And the circumstances around Billy's death caused Max a lot of guilt. So she's also feeling like happy because her brother was terrible to her, but she's feeling sad because also he was her brother, and then guilty because he died I can't remember exactly. He died because they were at the mall and fighting this monster, and he got possessed, and it was, yeah, messy. Anyway, the emotions that Max goes through on her grieving process are so, like, there's such a roller coaster. She doesn't just lash out. She doesn't just get angry. She does lash out. She isolates from her friends, and she basically just tries to run away from her feelings. When she does finally confront them, it is very mixed, because I think she says at one point that she's kind of happy that he's gone, but she feels that she can't feel that because she's not supposed to, which is a very complex way to feel. It's not a direct emotion because of the situation of his death and their relationship. Building complex emotional responses is quite difficult, but there are a few ways that we can make it a bit easier for ourselves. This can be identifying your character's main triggers, diving into their backstory, and specifically the emotions that they were taught to suppress. Often the reason people have big emotional responses to things is because they are finally tackling emotions that they have been suppressing for a really long time. There are taught emotional responses. There are ways that we behave that we don't really know why we behave that way. So there's a lot of unpacking that can go into your character's emotional response. The prompting question for this section is, what is the relationship behind the emotions your character is experiencing, and how do the dynamics of your characters impact how they respond? Part 4, emotional consistency. Your characters need internal logic. to their emotions. I know that sounds a little bit contradictory, but there is always going to be a point A and point B to your character's emotional journey. They need values, they need morals, they need some kind of compass as to why they're acting the way they're acting. For this, we are going to look at Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, Zuko's character arc is quite possibly the best character redemption in the history of television. I'm gonna say it. I know hundreds of people have already said it, and I'm putting in my 2 cents. And we're saying, yes, it is the best redemption arc ever. And one of the reasons that it is such a good redemption arc is because we get to see all of the ups and downs of Zuko's growth. Now, this ties into emotional consistency because Zuko doesn't go from point A to point B without issues. He doesn't have a smooth ride. There's a lot of hurdles, there's a lot of roadblocks, and this creates a ride that the audience can follow. It creates believability because we see his struggles. If he smoothly sailed to, from being the antagonist at the beginning of season 1 to being Aang's teacher in season 3, it would not be as believable because we'd be like, how did you get from point A to point B so quickly? I don't get it. The fact that he had so many mistakes, that he had so many roadblocks along the way, makes it so much more believable. He had people pulling him in both directions. He had his Uncle Iroh on one side, he had his family and his past life and on another. It just creates this push and pull of him wanting his past, childhood. He wants to have that idyllic life again, the one that he sees with nostalgia, but he also knows that the way that his uncle is teaching him to live is way better for him. And this definitely comes to a head when he decides to side with Azula in Crossroads of Destiny and betrays his uncle. This also weighs on him a lot going forward into season 3, which plays even more into emotional consistency because of how much we have seen Zuko and Iroh together. It wouldn't make sense if Zuko simply didn't care about Iroh. The fact that he feels so guilty about betraying his uncle really says a lot about how much they mean to each other after all those years of traveling together. And the fact that he honestly doesn't like being back in the Fire Nation shows how much he has grown since he left. And his eventual betrayal of his father and joining the Avatar on their quest really speaks to his emotional consistency. Consistency does not mean, in the way of character writing, them staying the same. It means that their journey is believable in the way of the ups and downs that they go through. All of this keeps Zuko consistent as he goes from point A to point B. So he is way more believable through his journey. Just how it goes. You know where you want your characters to end up, but you can't have your character's emotions simply be strings that you're about to pull. They need to play into the arc, and knowing that your character is going to go from point A to point B is super important, but you need to make their journey there believable by having ups and downs along the way. Now, the prompting question for this section is your character given enough time for their growth to seem believable, and who or what is influencing their growth? And the final section is part 5, connect emotions to the stakes. Now, stakes are a huge part of making your characters feel real, because if your characters don't care about what's going on, your audience isn't going to care. Now, the example I'm going to use for this section is Knives Out, and specifically Marta. Through the film, we do follow Marta's point of view, which follows the murder of her employer. So through this, we do see Marta have a really big tie to the stakes of the film. Now, the stakes in Knives Out is if Marta doesn't succeed in hiding her involvement in Harlem's death, she will probably go to prison and her family will be deported. If she succeeds, that won't happen. So through the film, we do have the stakes. The stakes actually stay the same, but the tension rises as Marta receives the inheritance, the family of her employer descend, basically, just like wanting the money back, and everything basically falls apart. She's being closed in on by the cops and everything like that. If Marta simply didn't care about her family being deported or any of the stakes that she has going on, she didn't care about going to jail, it would not hit the same. If she was just like, meh, it doesn't really matter, then it would be like, okay, so why do I care? That's kind of dumb. So having your characters feel all the gravity of the situation is super important. Her fear in the face of these stakes is so real and so relatable because they are very real stakes. I know a lot of us are writing like fantasy and science fiction, but in the same way, they're very similar because in fantasy, you're often just like faced with a lot of like death, and you're faced with a lot of like very high stakes situations, and so the characters will react in very big ways because they're very big stakes. Even if you're writing fantasy, your characters need to react in a way that is believable for the kind of stakes that they are facing. Now, the final prompting question of this video and for this section is, what are the stakes your character is dealing with, and how strongly do they react to the stakes being stated to them if that happens, like in Knives Out?
Pay attention.
This is what's gonna happen if you
Your
don't do
mom
this.
is still undocumented, and if this is your fault, she'll be found out and at best deported, and your family will be broken. But we're not going to let that happen, are we? Huh?
Now I'm going to do a little recap. I'm going to give you all of the prompting questions just so you can write them down or anything like that. What experiences in your character's past informs how they respond in the present? What emotional scars do they carry with them? Is there someone your character feels safe enough around to open up to? If not, can you build that kind of relationship into your story? What is the relationship behind the emotions your character is experiencing? And how do the dynamics of your characters impact how they respond? Is your character given enough time for their growth to seem believable? And who or what is influencing their growth? And finally, what are the stakes your character is dealing with, and how strongly do they react to the statement of those stakes? Okay, now that is everything I have for this video. My camera is overheating again, so I'm gonna make this real quick. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to go down into the description and sign up for my email list. I'm giving away a free workbook about building your writing confidence that'll only take you 10 minutes to do. It's completely free. Just go down to the description, click that link, and you'll get it right away. And without further ado, stay creative, keep writing, and I will catch you guys next week with another video. Bye.